Narrator. Imagine, for a moment, a frozen world. A desolate expanse of snow and ice, where the wind howls like a banshee, and temperatures plummet to a lethal -40 degrees Celsius. Now, imagine a tent, pitched precariously on a mountain slope in this unforgiving wilderness. It's not torn by a storm, but meticulously, deliberately, slashed open from the inside. Inside that tent, everything remains: warm clothing, sturdy boots, crucial supplies, and the very shoes its occupants should have been wearing. Outside, a trail of bare footprints, or steps taken in a single shoe, or mere socks, lead away into the blinding white oblivion. This isn't the opening scene of a chilling nightmare. This is a cold, hard, historical fact. For over 6 decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident has haunted the annals of the unexplained, a dark stain on the northern Ural Mountains. 9 experienced Soviet ski hikers, embarking on a journey of the highest difficulty, vanished into the Siberian night, only to be found in the most bizarre and horrifying circumstances imaginable. Their deaths were deemed the result of a compelling natural force, an elemental power so immense, so inexplicable, that it defied all rational understanding. But what was that force? And why, to this day, does the name Dyatlov Pass send a shiver down the spine of anyone who dares utter it? This is a story of adventure turned unspeakable tragedy, of human endurance pushed beyond breaking point, and of a mystery that time, science, and even multiple government investigations, have failed to definitively lay to rest. Our story begins in January 1959, in the Soviet Union. Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, was a leader of exceptional promise. He assembled a group of 9 other skilled hikers, most of them fellow students and peers, for an ambitious skiing expedition across the northern Urals. They were a formidable team, 8 men and 2 women initially, all experienced, all Grade 2 hikers, aiming for the coveted Grade 3 certification, the highest available in the Soviet Union. Their route, estimated as Category 3 difficulty, would take them 300 kilometers through treacherous terrain to Mount Otorten, a peak known for its unforgiving conditions, especially in February. This was no amateur outing. Dyatlov and his team were meticulously prepared, their route approved by the Sverdlovsk City Route Commission. They were young, fit, and full of the unshakable confidence that comes with expertise. On January 23, the group, now 10 strong, departed Sverdlovsk City. They journeyed by train to Ivdel, then by truck to Vizhai, the last inhabited settlement before the true wilderness began. The landscape became increasingly stark, the air growing colder, thinner, and the snow deeper with every kilometer. On January 27, they began their trek towards Mount Otorten. But just one day later, a minor setback occurred. Yuri Yudin, one of the 10, suffering from knee and joint pain, made the difficult decision to turn back. It would save his life. The remaining 9 hikers continued, unaware that they were marching towards an appointment with an unknown horror. Thanks to diaries and cameras later found at their final campsite, we can trace their last known movements. On January 31, they reached the edge of a highland area, caching surplus food and equipment for their return journey. The next day, February 1, they started to move through the pass. Their plan, it seems, was to conquer the pass and establish camp on the opposite side, finding shelter from the burgeoning storm. But the weather had other ideas. Snowstorms descended, visibility plummeted, and they lost their way, deviating westwards towards the summit of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose very name, in the language of the indigenous Mansi people, translates chillingly to Dead Mountain. Realizing their error, the group faced a critical decision. Descend 1.5 kilometers to the relative safety of a forested area, or make camp right there, on the exposed eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. Dyatlov, perhaps loath to lose the altitude they had gained, perhaps intent on practicing mountain camping, chose the latter. It would be their last camp. Days later, back in Vizhai, an unsettling silence began to grow. Dyatlov had promised to send a telegram by February 12, upon their return. Delays were common, but as the 12th passed, then the 13th, and the 14th, a quiet unease blossomed into outright alarm. By February 20th, the families of the trekkers demanded action. Rescue operations began, initially with volunteer students and teachers, then rapidly escalating to involve the army and militia, with planes and helicopters scouring the frozen wastes. Then, on February 26, the unimaginable happened. Searchers found the group's abandoned, badly damaged tent on the slopes of Kholat-Syakhl. The scene that greeted them was nothing short of baffling, a tableau of terror frozen in time. Mikhail Sherevin, the student who discovered it, described a tent half torn down, covered with snow, empty. All of the group's belongings, their food, their shoes, had been left behind. Investigators confirmed it, the tent had not been torn open by the wind, but cut open from the inside. 9 sets of footprints led away from the campsite, each more chilling than the last. Some were made by people wearing only socks, others a single shoe, some completely barefoot. They stretched for 1.5 kilometers, leading down towards the edge of a nearby forest. After about 500 meters, the tracks were swallowed by fresh snowfall, as if the mountain itself had tried to erase their desperate flight. At the forest's edge, beneath a towering Siberian pine, the searchers found the visible remains of a small, desperate fire. And there, beneath the boughs, were the first 2 bodies, Krivonashenko and Doroshenko. They were shoeless, dressed only in their underwear, their skin the ghastly brown typical of those who succumbed to severe frostbite. The branches on the pine tree above them were broken up to 5 meters high, suggesting that one of the hikers had climbed, desperately, perhaps searching for something, perhaps for their abandoned camp, or a sign of hope. Between the pine and the original camp, 3 more corpses were discovered, Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin. They lay sprawled at distances of 300, 480, and 630 meters from the tree, in poses that suggested they had been attempting to return to the tent, struggling against the brutal cold and deep snow, only to fall, utterly exhausted, and finally, to freeze to death. Slobodin had a small crack in his skull, but it was not considered fatal. The remaining 4 travelers proved harder to find. It took more than 2 agonizing months, until May 4, when the thawing snow finally revealed their horrifying secret. They were discovered under 4 meters of snow in a ravine, 75 meters further into the woods from the Siberian pine. These 4, Dubinina, Zolotaryov, Thibault-Brignoles, and Kolevatov, were better dressed than the others, and there were signs that some clothing from those who had died first had been removed and repurposed. Dubinina, for instance, wore Krivonashenko's burned, torn trousers, her left foot and shin wrapped in a torn jacket. A desperate struggle for survival. But it was the medical examination of these final 4 bodies that truly plunged the incident into the realm of the grotesque. While the first 5 had died of hypothermia, 3 of these last 4 hikers had suffered fatal injuries. Thibault-Brignoles had major skull damage. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had sustained severe chest fractures. Boris Vozrozdeny, the forensic expert, stated unequivocally that the force required to cause such damage would have been extremely high, comparable to that of a car crash. Yet, and this is crucial, there were no external wounds associated with these bone fractures. It was as if they had been subjected to immense pressure, a crushing force, but from within, or without leaving a mark on their skin. Then came the details that would forever cement the Dyatlov Pass incident as one of history's most disturbing mysteries. All 4 bodies found at the bottom of the creek exhibited soft tissue damage to their heads and faces. Dubinina was found missing her tongue, her eyes, parts of her lips, facial tissue, and a fragment of her skullbone. Zolotaryov's eyeballs were gone, and Alexander Kolevatov was missing his eyebrows. The forensic expert judged that these injuries occurred post-mortem, attributed to the action of the running water in the stream. Yet, the images, the descriptions, remain indelibly unsettling. Initial speculation, fueled by the isolation of the region, pointed to the indigenous Mansi people. Had they attacked the group for encroaching on their sacred lands? Several Mansi were interrogated, but the theory was swiftly discounted. Only the hikers' footprints were visible around the tent, and there were no signs of a struggle. The nature of the injuries, particularly the immense force described by the medical examiner, simply didn't fit. The official inquest, which began immediately after the first 5 bodies were found, soon reached a dead end. Despite the bizarre evidence, the tent slashed from within, the barefoot flight into a blizzard, the internal crushing injuries without external marks, and the strange soft tissue damage, the investigation concluded that the group members had died because of a compelling natural force. The case was officially closed in May 1959, due to the absence of a guilty party, and the files were sent to a secret archive. Decades later, fragments of the investigation would slowly emerge, adding more fuel to the fire of speculation. Journalists claimed the files noted that some levels of radiation were found on one victim's clothing. Relatives attending the funerals recalled the bodies having a deep brown tan, or even an orange skin, and gray hair, phenomena often attributed to frostbite, but still adding to the unsettling narrative. Another group of hikers, 50 kilometers south, reported seeing strange orange spheres in the sky on the very night of the incident, and similar sightings were independently corroborated throughout February and March 1959. Lev Nikitic Ivanov, the lead investigator from 1959, later admitted that his team had no rational explanation and that he had received direct orders from high-ranking officials to dismiss the sightings of flying spheres. The veil of secrecy, the fragmented information, the bizarre details, it all coalesced into a modern legend. In February 2019, Russian authorities, under public pressure, reopened the investigation, though they stated that only 3 explanations were being considered: an avalanche, a slab avalanche, or a hurricane. Murder was discounted. In 2020, they announced their conclusion: an avalanche was the most likely cause. Andrei Kuryakov, deputy head of the regional prosecutor's office, stated that the group's actions, while ultimately fatal, were not panicking but a heroic struggle against insurmountable odds. The official narrative suggests that a slab avalanche, a type of avalanche where a cohesive block of snow breaks away, could have shifted above their tent. This sudden, violent event would have created loud cracks and rumbles, terrifying the sleeping hikers and forcing them to cut their way out of the tent rather than risk being buried alive. In their panicked state, poorly clothed, they fled to what they perceived as safety, the tree line 1.5 kilometers away. Some would have succumbed to hypothermia on the way back to the tent for clothes, while others, trying to find better shelter further down, fell into a snow hole or ravine, suffering the blunt force trauma consistent with the original autopsy findings. Even the missing soft tissue could be explained by post-mortem scavenging in the running water of the creek. A 2021 study by Swiss scientists lent further credence to this specific type of avalanche. However, many arguments persist against the avalanche hypothesis, both old and new. The incident site showed no obvious signs of an avalanche having occurred, there were no patterns of debris, no damaged tree line. More than 100 expeditions since 1959 have never reported avalanche conditions in that specific location, a place deemed entirely unlikely for such an event, especially in February. Furthermore, Dyatlov and Zolotaryov were highly experienced skiers and mountaineers. They would have been acutely aware of avalanche risks and would never have pitched a tent in a danger zone. Perhaps most tellingly, the footprint patterns leading away from the tent were not those of people running in panic, but of individuals walking at a normal, albeit desperate, pace. The compelling natural force remained compellingly obscure. Other theories have swirled in the dark corners of the internet and in numerous books and documentaries. The katabatic wind hypothesis, a violent, sudden katabatic wind, an extremely powerful downhill wind, could have made it impossible to remain in the tent, forcing the hikers out. They might have sought shelter behind the tree line, constructing bivouacs, one of which could have collapsed, causing the severe injuries. The infrasound hypothesis, popularized by Donnie Icar's book Dead Mountain, this theory posits that winds swirling around Kholat Syakhl created a Kármán vortex street, generating infrasound waves. These low-frequency sounds, inaudible to the human ear, are known to induce feelings of anxiety, panic, and physical discomfort, potentially driving the hikers from their tent in a state of irrational terror. Once away from the source, their composure might have returned, but the darkness and cold would have sealed their fate. The military test hypothesis. This chilling theory suggests the campsite lay within the path of a Soviet parachute mine exercise. Woken by deafening explosions, the hikers could have fled in panic, suffering internal damage from the concussive blasts, heavy internal trauma with little external injury, just like the autopsy reports. The mysterious, glowing orange orbs seen in the sky could have been military aircraft or the descending mines themselves. The radiation found on clothing, the strange skin discoloration, and the initial official secrecy all seemingly fit. However, proponents acknowledge that radiological dispersal should have affected all, not just some, of the hikers, and skin discoloration can be explained by natural mummification. The official secrecy was also standard Soviet procedure. Paradoxical undressing, a known phenomenon in advanced hypothermia, where victims experience a sensation of burning warmth, leading them to strip off their clothes, ironically hastening their demise. While 6 died of hypothermia, the fact that some hikers had taken clothing from the already deceased suggests a degree of rational thought that contradicts this. Even discredited theories, like an attack by local Mansi tribesmen or wild animals, once held sway, only to be systematically dismantled by the lack of evidence, no other footprints, no animal tracks, no signs of struggle. Theories of internal arguments or romantic disputes were also deemed implausible given the group's harmonious dynamic and the lack of external evidence for a fight violent enough to cause such injuries. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains a stark, haunting reminder of humanity's vulnerability against the raw power of nature, or something far more sinister. A group of seasoned, intelligent young people, at the peak of their abilities, met a horrifying end under circumstances that continue to defy complete explanation. Was it a freak avalanche, a force of nature so precise and sudden that it crushed bones without breaking skin, and confused experienced mountaineers into a barefoot dash to their deaths? Or was it something else entirely, a secret military experiment gone wrong, a rare meteorological phenomenon, or an ancient, unknown force lurking in the desolate reaches of the Ural Mountains? The mountain pass now bears Igor Dyatlov's name, a permanent memorial to a mystery that has endured for over 6 decades. A chilling tribute to 9 lives lost to the brutal embrace of the wild, and to the eternal, unsettling question, what truly happened on Kholat Syakhl, the Dead Mountain, on that fateful night in February 1959. The whispers of the wind sweeping across the pass still carry the echoes of an unfathomable horror, a testament to a truth that remains buried deep within the snow and ice, forever just beyond our grasp.